Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a crosswind helicopter takeoff. Now for those of you familiar with helicopter flying, a lot of times people are like, well, we have a crosswind, we'll just point into the wind and go. We don't always have that option as a helicopter. One problem we could face, for example, are things like buildings. We could face air traffic control. We have to take off from a taxiway. Of course, you're all laughing at me because I'm sitting over here in the grass rather than on the nice asphalt over there. But whenever you're practicing maneuvers with this, I want to be somewhat nice to my skids here. Now, let's take a look at our conditions. That doesn't look very pleasant. That looks to me like we have a good 10-15 knot crosswind from the right. Now, as I was saying before, a lot of people would be tempted to float the helicopter up, point to the right, and go. But sometimes we have really, really heavy weights, and we run into a situation where we can't get away with that shenanigan because we need to do a running takeoff to not overheat anything on the helicopter, especially this particular helicopter. This thing likes to run really, really hot. So what do? Well, we're going to do a couple different things. One thing, of course, is we're going to take our cyclic, which, remember, this is controlling that big rotor above our head. We're going to put it a little bit to the direction of the wind. Now, for those of you who are familiar with airplane takeoffs, you're like, aha, I know exactly where you're going with this. It's the same thing. Slightly. Remember, with an airplane, you get going, then you go. With a helicopter, you start gone, if that makes sense. So the next thing we're going to have to do, of course, is use our feet to maintain direction and use our cyclic to maintain position. Now, one of the things I really don't care about helicopters in flight sim that they did to basically make it easier for the console folks is the fact the controls are not linear. So you can see me kind of whipping it around here, how it like automatically dampens itself. That's really, really, really frustrating for things like this because you're basically fighting the fight that fights the fight kind of a thing. So don't expect perfection the first 10 times you do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tip my cyclic gently to the right, and I'm going to give myself just a little bit of anti-torque here. Now, in a real helicopter, I'm actually increasing my collective here. You can feel the whole helicopter groan. And what will happen is the whole helicopter will lift itself. See how it starts to get a little light on the skids there? The whole helicopter will start to bring itself up. Now, one thing we have to remember is we cannot exceed our dynamic tip angle. If we do, what's going to happen is the whole helicopter is going to roll on the right in this case. And as soon as we do that, surprise, we're going to become a very ugly looking lawnmower or tiller, depending on your farming, your agricultural inclination, so to speak. So what I'm going to do is just do what I normally do here. I'm going to go ahead and gently increase it. And I'm just going to let us come off the ground. And you can see the helicopter already has a pretty strong tendency to kind of float to the right, so it takes very little. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my feet to maintain direction. And I'm going to use my cyclic to control where I want to be. We're going to continue this way. And the whole helicopter now is actually flying sideways to maintain my ground track. You can see that very distinctively. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to transition as we hit the 40 knots of translational lift. And we're just going to bring ourselves airborne just like that. So you could see there that we were using that cyclic to kind of cancel out position, and now we're using our feet to maintain the heading. A lot of times we're just using our feet to kind of point us straight, sort of a thing like that. Obviously, that's a gross oversimplification, but you could see that I had to kind of adjust my thrust vector there to make it go ahead and be safe for us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and turn us around. Go ahead and execute a pretty ugly turn here. By the way, please don't fly in these conditions with a helicopter without a co-pilot, because this is incredibly dangerous. And I'm just going to maintain a nice, smooth, coordinated turn here. Basically bleed my speed. And you can see just how hazy things are. This is a terrible day to fly, which is exactly why I chose to fly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make our way down to the ground. Now we're going to go ahead and do a crosswind landing. Now, because the wind is pure out of the basically 90 degrees here to our runway, either runway is considered perfectly acceptable for us. Keep in mind, in an emergency or something like that, we might not be able to get away with a maneuver like this. We'd have to be landing into the wind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find the angle that I need to travel at in order to safely get myself to the ground. Now, you'll notice here, as I start to slow down, see how I'm being pushed to my right here? That's because of that crosswind factor. The other thing you're going to observe is as I'm trying to track along the ground here, if you look straight below me there, I have to put my helicopter at almost about a 10 to 15 degree, basically nose into the wind here in order to maintain the position on the ground. Now, I'm also looking down at my little turn coordinator there to study exactly what it's showing us, which seems to be saying that I'm still actually flying slightly into a slip here. So go ahead and tap my, I was going to say aileron, I'm going to tap my cyclic a little bit into the wind there, as we're just kind of feeling out what the helicopter wants to do. And all we're trying to do is identify how much of a crab angle we have to put on it in order to safely get it onto the ground. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start setting myself up into my landing hover. Now, this is where things are going to get more challenging for us. As you slow down, remember, you're going to need significantly more cyclic in order to safely get us on the ground. Now, if you look carefully, you can see that my entire helicopter is actually tilted to the left here, which is what we're using in order to maintain our position on the ground. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to lower myself down. Again, take your time. Take your time. We're not in a rush here. And all we're going to do as we glide is slowly wait for that helicopter to push down. And once we're down, we're just going to gently go ahead and cancel out that cyclic effect. Now, I still have a little bit of left cyclic in right now. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't know that we're still on the off these skids. You know, if I were to suddenly release the pressure like that, the whole entire helicopter could do one of those and we could tip over to the right and make a really, really big mess of things. So now that we're down on the ground, we can go ahead and execute another one of our crosswind takeoffs. This time, if we look at that giant sock behind us, we can see that we have a slight advantage this time, because the wind is going to basically coming from the direction that we're facing now. So we're going to use the same technique. So again, I'm going to give myself just a little more or less hold this at cyclic neutral this time. And the reason I'm holding it neutral is because, as you know, we always have to do that little J. This time we're not going to, because that wind is going to be pushing us off course. So same technique as always. I'm just going to give it a little bit of power to lighten up on the skids. And we're automatically going to go ahead and tip the helicopter to keep us in position, and then use my feet for the purposes of basically keeping us in the correct heading. So now I'm just going to slowly increase power, give us a little bit of tip, and we're just going to immediately pull ourselves into a crab angle that's going to be maintaining a constant track across the ground. Now, the great thing about a helicopter is I can just give myself a little bit of left foot to do this if I needed. But for us, we're going to use just a little bit of cycling. And just like that, you can see we have a nice and smooth takeoff that gets us airborne without too many shenanigans that are going on, without any drama or anything like that, and without running into the risk that we're going to suddenly lose control or tip the whole helicopter over and make a big mess of things. And again, normally you wouldn't fly a helicopter in these conditions. This is a wee bit sketch, but it also goes ahead and demonstrates, just how sketchy this can be. Now, if we were in a big oil rig in the middle of the Atlantic or something like that, this could be a very similar situation, but we wouldn't have the benefit of all that lovely ground effect kind of support us when we're getting airborne. But other than that, enjoy.